I know y'all can't see me. This is purposeful. Doesn't matter what I look like at all. What matters is the voice I can raise is the power of one. That is the message. The power of my one voice. And I'm going to talk about 4 people and how they use the power of one to influence, in some cases, hundreds of people, in some cases, thousands of people, in some cases, millions of people. Their one voice. And I'm going to talk about 4 people. The first is Carlos. The second is Kanye West. The third is Julie Jamin. And the fourth is me. The first is Carlos. I had no idea who Carlos was until about 3 o'clock yesterday. I was sitting down at an event at my daughter's open house in an auditorium for a talent show. And this school has a lot of kids there who have ADHD and dyslexia and learning challenges, and they are having a talent show. And I was watching the show, and just before Carlos came up on stage, there was another person up on stage playing the piano and playing it very well, a long piece, very skilled, beautiful. And I'll be honest, I was falling asleep. I was literally falling asleep. Towards the end, I nodded my head and woke back up, but I looked around to see if anybody noticed I was falling asleep. And then Carlos came up on the stage. And Carlos came up with his teacher, the musical director. And he sat at the piano, his teacher did, and then Carlos sat at the piano, and they started to play this song. And I recognized the song immediately. It was Amazing Grace. We all know it's a Christian song. And the sound started emanating through the place. And they were doing a duet. And Carlos played a little bit. And it wasn't perfect. And then it went back to his teacher. And he played this really perfect, fluent, no mistakes, awesome example of... And then went back to Carlos, and Carlos did his own thing. And again, it wasn't perfect. It had errors. You didn't know, but it had this power and this energy and this love and this light that was just amazing. And he played on the end of the keyboard where nobody else played. He played Amazing Grace and had little errors. And this kid just had this confidence and this amazingness to us that I could not keep my eyes off. I said, wow, that was amazing. And Carlos got off on stage. And then 3 or 4 other people came up. There's a comedian came up. Some people came play some other instruments. Guy played a guitar. Some people sang. And Carlos came up again. Carlos came up as vibrant, as powerful, as loving, as light-filled, like as confident as he was before. And he started this, they played this music in the background of this rock song that goes, money, da-da-da. I don't know the name of the song, but it's a very long rock song. And it played in the background, and it just had the music. It did not have the voice. Carlos added the voice. Carlos, by far, did not have a beautiful voice. His voice was a little grating on my ears. But once again, the power, like I said, the light, the love, the confidence, the mission for him to say, I have something to say, and I'm going to say it to this crowd of probably 100 parents or so in the audience who were fluent and powerful in their own right, came there to watch their kids, and he had this confidence, and this song was long. And he got up there and sang it. It wasn't perfect. It was off key. He missed lyrics. He stopped his voice in and out. But he did it in this way. He mimicked the musical instruments with his mouth. And they weren't perfect mimics. They weren't perfect, imitations. He mimicked playing an air guitar. It wasn't very good. He threw a football around the stage, a part in the song. He threw the ball back wobbly. It wasn't perfect. He barely caught the ball. He did all these things imperfect. But it was beautiful and it was amazing. And the audience was spellbound. And the song ended and he just got off the stage and walked off. And this light of his was just bigger and brighter. And I just couldn't believe it. And I thought that was it. Man, this kid was amazing. And then he came up again. He came up again a couple people later. And he sat with the chorus. And he sang a song. And he used his voice again. Again, it wasn't perfect. But he didn't care. He had something to tell the world. And he wasn't going to let anybody deny him. He knew it's what he needed to say. And his confidence could have knocked down a brick wall. Could have knocked down a castle. Could have knocked down anything. Could not get this kid out of my mind. And he had these sunglasses with these rock star sunglasses. And he almost fell off the stage at one point. And I think it may have come up actually 4 times up on stage for this talent show that probably had 20 people. So he did roughly 20% of the time on the stage. After the show, I got up to Carlos and I thanked him. And I said his love and his light and his confidence, I will never forget. He's an amazing person. And I talked to his parents and I walked away. And I walked away with my soon-to-be ex-wife and my 2 kids. And I drove back. I drove back 2.5 hours to Northampton, Mass. It was a long day. I got back with the sun going down. I walked my dog. I came back. I turned on the TV, and there was Kanye West. And I'm not a Kanye West fan. I'm not a huge fan of him. I think he's very egotistical. I don't know, some of his stuff seems way out there to me. But he caught my eyes. I started listening to his interview. And he was talking about, and this guy, unlike Carlos, is extremely talented, has an influence of millions of people around the world, probably the most influential people in the world in music and other spaces. And people know about him. And he uses his platform in the same way Carlos goes. He doesn't care what other people think. He does what he thinks is right. And he was in the news because he wore a t-shirt that said, "White Lives Matter." And he's a black guy. And he's getting a lot of backlash because there's a way that blacks are supposed to act. And we're all supposed to act. And Carlos is supposed to act. And everybody's supposed to act. But he didn't care. He was going to act in the way that he thought was right. And he thought it was right to say white lives matter. Because apparently that's racist to say these days. But it's not. And he's saying to the world, you know what? It doesn't matter the color of your skin. All lives matter. And I'm going to tell the world, and I'm going to use my platform, and I'm going to get canceled, and people are going to talk to me, but I don't care. And he got so much backlash. I started listening to this interview, and he said some wacky things in his mind. He clearly has had some struggles. But brilliant things the guy was saying. Some of them were wacky, like I said. And then he said this quote towards the end of his interview. And I'm paraphrasing. But he said, excuse me, he said, God-fearing people act or perform or do what they do in this world for the approval of an audience of one. And that one person is God. And I thought about this idea and I thought about it. And then it led me back to think about my power as one and how I'm using it in the world right now. And I thought about, excuse me, I thought about the woman that gave me the idea to use the power of one, and that is Julie Jamin, who is a woman in Washington State, who is a member of the YMCA there. I've never been to this YMCA ever, but she's been a member there for decades. She's liberal. She speaks up for women's causes. She's been speaking up for women's rights forever. She speaks up for the environment. She was in the YMCA one day in the female locker room, the women's locker room, and she was getting changed, I think, after swimming. And she was in there in the shower, and she noticed a person in the shower in a woman's bathing suit that was a man, that was a male. And she noticed this male was staring at these two young girls taking off their bathing suit. And 5 years ago, we would have been outraged of that, spoke about this on the spot, not accepted it. But we've been shouted down, called things, intimidated to use our platform, unfairly bullied to call out a blatant wrong. But Julie Jamin didn't care. She lost her voice and she said, "Get out of here right now. You don't belong in here." And the person went to the YMCA, and what you think would happen didn't happen. The woman who'd been there for decades, had been doing everything for women and their voices, was forced out of the YMCA. They revoked her membership for a lifetime. They said, "You can't do that. You can't call out a blatant wrong of a male being in a woman's private space where a little girl who has no voice is being stared at." And it was wrong. And I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this story. I didn't know about her story, but she used her power of one voice yet again. She said, "No, I'm not going to accept you taking away my membership, no matter how big your organization is, because I'm going to use the power of my one to speak out to the world." And she had a press conference in front of the YMCA with a bunch of women who supported her, and a bunch of liberals and hateful people, Antifa and other people, tried to silence her voice, tried to attack her, and not let her speak about what an obvious wrong of her private space being taken away, a place that's supposed to be exclusive for females. And she spoke about this, and this press conference went viral on the web. I ran into her press conference by accident. I saw it. It got me thinking the power of my one as a father with my two daughters, my teenage daughters. And I thought about the YMCA in my town. And I thought, you know what? This can't be true. There's no way this is true. No, there's no way that the YMCA is allowing males in female spaces and kicking out an 80-year-old woman for calling out a blatant wrong. So I called up my YMCA and I got somebody on the line and I asked them, I said, "Hey, I heard that in the YMCA that if a male goes into a female space, that's okay. Is that true?" And he said, "Yes. However they think their gender is, they can go in that space." And I go, "Yeah." I go, "So what you're telling me is if somebody thinks they are a female, they can go in there. So I could dress up or think I'm a female today, this very minute. I say, you know what? I think I'm a female today. And I could march right in there, no question asked. There'd be no policing of that, of me walking in this, barging in this private space of these females who think it's a female space because it says on the door a sign of a woman on there. And I think it actually says women, but sorry, I've been banned from the property. I can't confirm that anymore. It says that, and it's okay. So that person who may not even be a woman can just barge right in there. That's okay. And I said, so what if my daughter's comes in there to take a shower or change or get in her outfit to go work out or go swimming or any of this stuff, and she doesn't like the idea of a male watching her unchange or seeing the male unchange or in the shower or whatever. What does it matter how she feels? Does it matter that, she might be uncomfortable. She might be nervous. She might have some body image issues. Well, I know countless women don't like to be seen nude. I took a woman's psychology of women's class. I didn't even think about this. In college, I was the only man in the class, but I wanted to learn how women thought. So I took this class and we did a outline of what we thought our body was. And we drew an outline of our body. And then we laid on the ground and we put our bodies, and we got another person, I got another woman, to trace what our bodies were. And these women that were not overweight in any way, in many cases had near perfect figures. In my estimation, everybody has their idea what a perfect figure was. And these women had very thin figures, curved figures too, drew themselves as hugely much bigger than the reality of who they were. And it was shocking to me. It was shocking to me that they had these body image of who they were, which ties back to these women that don't want to see people see them in men to see them in the locker room, because they probably, almost every single one in this class of these 20 or 30 women, college girls in this class, saw themselves as more overweight or more weight, more fat than they were, than the reality of what they were. So maybe even the women that have these perfect, almost model-like figures would not want to be seen by a male. And I thought about, back to what I was talking about, the YMCA woman, does it matter of what my daughter thinks? Does it matter, like I said, that she's nervous, she's apprehensive, and maybe there are women in there that are literally scared because they've had sexual assault as a person, and maybe this person, maybe they're not a person that's going to attack them or take advantage of them, but they don't know that. They've had these moments in their lives, not any problem of their own, for no fault of their own, where they don't trust men. But now they're forced men into their private spaces, males. And I'm not even a female. I don't know what it's like to be a female, but I got 2 daughters. And she said, well, this woman at the YMCA said, well, if they have a problem with that, they can go to the gender neutral locker room. I'm like, wait a minute. You're kicking the females out of their private space for a male to say, you know what? It matters more what this person who comes in and says they're a male when they're not. It matters more what they think than this little girl who has no voice, than my daughter that has little voice, than these females that if they say anything will be called transphobic, hateful, for wanting to have this private space. All their choice is to go to the gender neutral locker room where their gender is not up for debate. They know very well that they're a woman, so they have to go to the gender locker room, which is smaller, more primitive, not as nice, and pack all these women in there when they're like 10 transgender women that go to the Y at most. So why don't they have to go to the space that is made specifically where they can be left alone? They can take a shower and do whatever they want, have their space. But all these women, 95% of people have to say, if you feel uncomfortable, you have to leave and go to the gender neutral locker room. And I was livid. I was livid, and it was clear. I was respectful of this woman. My voice was raising just like this. And I was very upset. And I talked to my daughter about this. And I told her, and she was so livid, I could barely even get the words out. I literally had to pull over my car. She says, Daddy, I don't want to go back to the YMCA. So I never been back to that YMCA. And this is a long, involved story, and it doesn't need to go. But the power, I will go back to the power of one I'm talking about. The power of one, of Julie Jamin, got her voice heard on the internet to where I heard it, the power of one, to you have the power of one to influence my daughters, protect my daughters, hell or high water, the hill I die on, I will do any for them, to speak out at the Y, to use the power of one to now protest at the YMCA as I do, to get the power of one, of every one of those one individuals to speak to the YMCA, where women have come to me and said there have been males in the locker room and they weren't happy about it, but they didn't say anything because they were worried about losing their membership in some cases, called transphobic, and be shunned and socially exiled and attacked like I am over. I don't care. You can attack me all you want. I don't care. I know what I'm doing right. And they are worried about losing their jobs, but they tell me personally to my face, I don't like what's going on. I've had probably 10 or 12 people sign my petition. But the power of one, of this one institution, this YMCA, this Goliath of a corporation with 20 million members in 10,000 locations, use the power of one to mislead these members with their signs that have women's, men's, icon, or in some cases both the words women and men's, when the reality within those spaces, every gender is allowed. And they're misleading millions with the power of one. So I'm out on the street with the power of one to influence dozens of people, which can go inside and convince this Goliath of a corporation I can be David, and slay, not slay, but get them to actually change this. And it's happening, folks. It's happening, folks. This what I've been doing on the web has got a woman in Washington who's been covering the Julie Jamin story to come next week to cover my story, which will go out to thousands, probably millions around the internet, which will be outraged, which will maybe get the goal of my idea, which is get the YMCA. If they're going to mislead millions with these signs on every private space that says they're a woman's space and a man's space, whether it's a locker room or a bathroom or anything else, they have to put on the door that they allow every gender in every locker room. So every person, whether it's a male or a female, knows that they may walk in to a male or a body part that they don't want to see, or some person might be staring at them that they don't want when they're nude or they're in their private space. It's the right of the YMCA to do one, but it's not their right to mislead. And I promise you, the power of one, the true one, God does not like this. He does not like the young men, supposedly Christian Association is doing this, because God created man and woman. That's it. He didn't create any other genders. He created man and woman. And he certainly didn't want man to use doctors to manipulate and change the gender of children when their minds are not even formed yet. To have hysterectomies, to have mastectomies, to castrate kids, to form artificial anatomy on males and females, to in some cases kids that are 14 years old, to give them puberty blockers, to give them hormones, to make them think they're a gender they weren't born. It's wrong. You want to become transgender, you want to do that, but don't do that to children. God knows this wrong. He's making this in my head come out to say, Billy, you may not be a perfect Christian. You may not know all the Bible verses. You may not go to church every Sunday, but you have the power of God. You have the fear of God. You have the love of God to use your platform to say, we are not going to stay silent to what is going on in America, whether it is the Goliath of a corporation, the YMCA doing it. We are going to let you use your voice to say what you need to say. And I'm going to remind you over and over, Billy, this is what you need to do. You need to call it the YMCA to get other Christians to rise and say, no, we are Christians. We will not let you defile the word of God without a fight. We will not let you mislead members at a supposed Christian men association. We will not let you stamp on the rights of women and girls and females all over this nation and discount their voices, their one voices. We will get you to use your one voice as Carlos uses one voice, as Kanye West, as Julie Jamin, as I do, to shrink this Goliath idea, whether it's the YMCA or anybody else, to stand up to the men and woman. God created man and woman, and that is it. And isn't it funny? Isn't it ironic that almost all these people, all these one people I talked to you about, Carlos, Kanye West, Julie Jamin, me, and the woman who's interviewing me next year from Washington, that are rising up with their one voices to reach this message out, to stand up for men and women in this nation of all the things that's going on. Isn't it ironic that all those people, except for maybe Carlos, which I don't know. I don't know if Carlos is a Christian. I have no idea. But the power of God is in him. I promise you that. I saw it on that stage yesterday. He might not know of God, but God knows of him. He may not love God, but God loves him. That's what God loves you, even if you don't love him. And the power of God is in that man. But I can tell you, Kanye West is a Christian. I know that. He said it. It reflects in his words. I might believe in everything that Kanye said, but he answers to God, the audience of one God. And that's why he rises to fight, to judge people not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character and their heart. And his is a godly character. I tell you that. I know that from hearing him. Julie Jamin is a Christian. I know. I heard it. I heard her say it. She used the power of her one to speak up for women. I am a Christian. I speak up for the power of one to speak for my daughters. The woman who's interviewing me next week, she is also a Christian. It's the power of one, folks. But that power of one all brings us back to the power of one mighty all God. He gives that power to us. In the end, folks, we all, like Kanye West said in his quote, are God-fearing people who act, talk, and perform for the approval of the audience one, God and Jesus Christ. That's what this is all about. So rise with me as Christians, as this world is turning upside down. I can tell you firsthand, I grew up in the Christian church. I fought God my whole life. There's so many stories in that. But God has always come back to me in so many ways, and I fought him all for long. And now, in the midst of being divorced from a woman who's a good woman, but she's spiritual, she's not Christian, my marriage is gone, and I've become such a close relationship with God. And this whole idea of his approval comes into my head even when I don't want it to, folks. If you're a Christian, you know this. You know these things. You see them in your life. I will be somewhere and something will happen. I'll lose my cool. I'll be completely by myself. And maybe I'll blurt out a cuss word. And immediately the image of God will come into my head. And I'll say, sorry, God, I shouldn't have said that. I know you don't want me to say it. And nobody's even in the room. Nobody's even there to hear it. Nobody's offended. No person's offended. But I know God is offended. I know he's offended by what I said. And then I'll be out and I'll say something post haste with somebody. And I know I'll hurt their feelings. And I'll immediately think of God. And later I'll say a prayer. I'll say it right there. And I'm saying, sorry, God, I know I shouldn't have said that. That's something you don't want me to do. You don't want me to say that about other people. You don't want me to act that way. It's back to the approval of one. Or I may be walking down the street and I see a pretty woman and I stare at her. I look in her way I know is a wrong way to look, that God would not want me to look at her. And I think of God again. I don't want to. I think, God, I can't do that. And the more I let God into my life, the more these things come into my life and I see things on the screen that I know God would not want me to see. I used to think this stuff was nuts. I think, oh my gosh, why do you let this impact your life? I don't let it. It happens. God comes into my heart and says anything. He gets me to make these videos at 6 o'clock in the morning to talk about this to other Christians, to motivate a spark in them to come together and rise the power of God of one. But it all comes back to what I'm saying. I want to close on this. It all comes back to what Kanye West is. Christians, God-loving people, act in accordance with their words and their actions and their performance to the approval of the audience of one, of God. That's it. All those people. So that's it, y'all. That's all I want to say. God bless you. Keep God in your thoughts, your words, your actions, everything you do. And he will become powerful in this world that's becoming a more and more godless society through politics and everything else, especially here in America. God bless you. It may be in your prayers and thoughts. And take care, y'all. Have a great day. You can check out what I'm doing at dadfedup.org as I rise for my daughters and women and females all over this nation, as I know I'm doing it in God's approval, using his sword and his shield to rise for what he created, man and woman.